The Doctor was contemplating his surroundings with an expression of intense pleasure. It was a long time since he'd felt this relaxed. In the cloudless sky above him, tiny white and yellow birds sang constantly to each other as they flew. The sea of knee-high grass in which he stood was not the green of earth grass, but instead was almost white, save for hints of the palest pastel shades of blue, green, pink and yellow. The TARDIS, standing sentinel a few yards away, was like a dark blue island floating on an ocean of colour that flowed across the landscape of shallow hills in which he stood. But the susurration of the slight breeze stroking the grass into motion didn't quite mask the approach of an unfamiliar step. At least, the Doctor thought it was an unfamiliar step, but when he turned, he realised it wasn't.
You know, I really do wish you wouldn't keep doing that.
Doing what? Dastiriam inquired mildly as she passed the TARDIS, laying a hand on it as if in greeting before she came to a halt beside him.
Appearing out of nowhere. It's most disturbing.
That must make you a very disturbing influence. After all, you appear out of nowhere all the time,
she pointed out, with a meaningful glance at the TARDIS.
Oh, well that's different.
Is it? Ah.
Aware that his logic was somewhat flawed, the Doctor shifted, rather uncomfortably.
Sorry, but I came here for a bit of peace and quiet. Respite, you might say. So I wasn't exactly expecting you. Which I suppose is exactly when I should have been expecting you. You did tell me always to expect the unexpected, didn't you?
Advice which I hope has served you well thus far.
I suppose it has. Yes.
And is the constantly unexpected what you're seeking respite from at the moment?
No. From Adric and Tegan. They've been squabbling again. The concept of being caught between a rock and a hard place has become distressingly familiar lately. So I thought I'd try bringing them here. Golorin, the Planet of Tranquillity. See if a few hours here might infuse some tranquility into them.
Is it working?
Not so you'd notice. Well, not yet, anyway. Still, Nyssa's keeping an eye on them. Doing her best to keep the peace, I expect.
The Doctor smiled fondly.
Well, that's Nyssa's special gift. She's a peacemaker.
He made an indeterminate gesture toward the crest of the nearest hill.
They're all off over there somewhere at the moment.
And I've disturbed a rare moment of solitude for you. My apologies, Doctor. Though I did promise you I'd try to choose moments when you had less calls on your attention, didn't I?
Yes, I suppose you did.
Dastiriam looked him up and down.
You're much more colour-coordinated this time. My compliments. It's very tasteful.
A small, though slightly mischievous furrow appeared between her eyebrows.
Though, if you don't mind my mentioning the, celery? An interesting choice, one can't help thinking.
The Doctor rolled his eyes.
No, not you as well. Do you know, I recently had an encounter with someone who had the cheek to call this my decorative vegetable phase. In a most derisory way, I might add.
Ah, yes, well, he would. Older people can be quite derogatory about the fashion choices of those younger than themselves. Hadn't you noticed?
Oh, then you already know about him. Or about me, I should say, since you evidently know exactly who he was.
I think perhaps will be is the correct phrase. Have you forgotten what I told you on our first meeting, Doctor? I know all about you.
Well, if that's true, why do you keep turning up as if I'm something in the oven and you have to keep checking to see if I'm done?
Dastiriam's expression didn't overtly change, but something registered in her eyes. A flash of reaction to his words. The Doctor stared at her, at first with arrested attention, but then with dawning comprehension.
I meant that as a joke, but it wasn't, was it?
He said, his eyes narrowing, speaking increasingly quickly as he warmed to his theme.
Well, something like that is going on, isn't it? Why? You're monitoring something? Something about me or to do with me? What is it?
Dastiriam looked at him with an uncharacteristically troubled expression, as if she wanted to say something, but knew that she mustn't.
Doctor, if I were preparing a meal, would you advise me to serve it halfway through the preparation process? Would that meal be a success?
The doctor looked mutinous for a moment.
Are you calling me half-baked?
Then his shoulders dropped and he sighed.
All right. Point taken. No, it wouldn't.
Well then,
said Asterion softly, and left it at that. They stared at each other for several seconds with something close to mutual regret. Then the doctor threw back his shoulders and lifted his chin, ostentatiously inhaling the fresh air.
I think I might just walk up to the top of the hill and see if I can see the others. Would you like to come?
Asterion smiled and took the arm he offered.
Why, thank you, kind sir. Yes, I think I could spare a few moments for that.
Together they walked to the crest of the hill. It sloped much more steeply on the other side, inclining down into a valley containing a small lake. 3 figures were sitting at the lakeside, facing away from the doctor and Asterion.
Perhaps the Planet of Tranquillity is exerting the desired influence after all. They look peaceful enough at the moment, don't they?
Oh, for now. I don't suppose it'll last, though. Tegan's glass will always be half empty, and Adric will always be convinced he knows better than everyone else. Mind you, I used to think that, I suppose, when I was younger. I was always right. Now I'm a bit older, it's sometimes harder to be sure about what's right.
Some might say that was a sign of growing maturity, Doctor.
Well, I wish a bit more of it would rub off on Adric. He can be so childish sometimes.
He's still very young, Doctor. Didn't you yourself once say there was no point in being grown up if you couldn't be childish sometimes? And don't forget, there's a great deal of difference between being childish and childlike. The latter being a quality you'll never quite lose the best elements of, I suspect. Your sense of wonder at the new and unexpected. Your sense of justice and fairness. Things innately part of a child's outlook and innately part of yours too.
The doctor was about to reply when he caught sight of what was happening at the lakeside. Tegan was on her feet, shading her eyes as she looked up the hill towards them. She said something and pointed. Adric and Nyssa looked round, then quickly got to their feet, also staring upwards.
You've been spotted. I suppose that means you'll be on your way, leaving me to come up with some sort of plausible explanation of your presence? Thank you very much.
You could always tell them the truth.
I don't know who you are, or where you come from, or why you keep dropping in on me. Yes, I suppose I could try that. Though I can't see Tegan letting go at that. Can you?
Sorry, Doctor, but there are some things even I can't resolve for you,
said Asterion, retreating a pace so that she was now slightly behind him. He didn't really notice the move, his attention momentarily focused on the 3 figures now climbing the hill toward him. Then her wording registered.
What do you mean, even you?
He turned round, but Asterion was no longer there.
You know,
said the doctor conversationally, as if she was still able to hear him.
There's another thing children always do. They ask why, and they never stop. No matter what explanation you give them, their response is always, why? And that's the question I'm going to keep asking you, until you finally give me the answer. So you're right. On that point, I'm going to be childish. Why shouldn't I? Oh, and here comes Tegan wanting her explanation. This is going to be fun.